Good afternoon, everyone. It's about 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome, everyone, to our monthly implementation science seminar. So we have this once every month where people who are working in implementation science come to talk to us about, the work they do. This is an opportunity for faculty as well as students to, gain a lot of knowledge and learn more about the field of implementation science. So for this month's seminar, we have Dr. Donna Shelley, who's here today to talk on implementing tobacco use treatment guidelines in public health systems in Vietnam. And Dr. Shelley is a professor in the Department of Population Health and the Department of Medicine. She's the co-director for the section of tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. So I'm going to hand it over to her, and then after the presentation, we'll open up the floor to questions.
So thank you all for coming, and I know some of you have to leave early. So I guess I would urge you to ask some questions if you have, particularly if I'm not being clear beforehand. Can you raise your hand if you're a student? Great.
I'm a student of life.
Okay. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I just want to acknowledge also Dr. Nancy Gbenga, who's in the audience here, who's been working with me on a qualitative analysis, which I'll show you, and teaching me how to be culturally competent in the Vietnam setting. So, many of you may know that tobacco use the rates are very high in Southeast Asia and Asia, and actually the adult smoking rates in Vietnam haven't budged since the last GAP survey in 2010, which is disappointing because actually Vietnam has done a lot put in appropriate air policies and recently increased the tax to create a tobacco fund. So that they signed the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control in 2004. For those of you who don't know what that is, it was actually the first treaty that WHO actually created, and there are hundreds of countries that have signed on. They're referred to as parties, and basically it's a public health treaty that obligates parties to sign on and ratify it to implement evidence-based tobacco control policies and programs. And they were able to really do this because we have a tremendous amount of evidence in what works and what doesn't work. A lot of that evidence, however, has been collected in Western countries or high-income countries. And so it's not really clear how we would actually implement or adapt those evidence-based guidelines, whether they're policies or for interventions like the health system, population health level, to a setting like Vietnam and their healthcare system. So my focus has been on Article 14, which is one of the FCTC articles. There are several of them, each one referring to a specific policy program. And, nationally or internationally, that article has lapsed. And it's kind of not surprising when you ask, one of the reasons is you ask countries, and they assume that it's going to be really expensive to implement smoking cessation services. And, one of the design issues we had was, like, how do we actually refute that with a design that maybe leverages existing infrastructure and workforce. So the primary aim of this study was to test the effectiveness of strategies for implementing Article 14 in healthcare centers. And I'll show you the system there. Just to kind of really be clear about what Article 14 is, this is really a shorthand of what it says. And, it refers to population and health systems, so policies. And we consider, by the way, obviously, if you study tobacco control, that these are all synergistic policies and programs. So you could consider actually passing some free laws as a way to help people quit, given the data that we have. So a 2015 survey, actually by one of our visiting professors here, Mark Law, he co-authored this article. They surveyed 142 countries and found that less than 50% had implemented recommended guidelines, meaning no budget for participation, no national guidelines, et cetera. And actually, there was an income gradient. So the lower income, as you might expect, actually, countries were even less likely to implement Article 14. So, like many countries, low middle-income countries, and actually Vietnam is now a middle-income country, there is a Ministry of Health, and in this case, there's a hierarchy of provincial, district, and commune. And we decided to work at the commune level, which is in Vietnam, like many countries, the community health center equivalent is really the primary access point for primary care and preventive care. And village health workers who basically work for two groups, they're working for the Ministry of Health, they sort of get their marching orders, their training to the Ministry of Health on their like 10 or 12 key public health priority areas, maternal health, and they're often tracked back to the millennial goals, sustainability goals. And then, but the village health workers also work for the community health centers, the CHCs. So there are about 8 to sometimes up to 20, depending on how big the commune or village, commune, I should say, the communes were also made up of multiple villages. Each, there's one village health worker for each village, actually. So there may be 20 villages, there will be 20 community health centers, village health workers. And what's interesting about the relationship is something we're actually just starting to realize we should be actually looking at here, which is this group of people who are trained as really clinician extenders as well as, so they work in the community health setting, the community setting, to implement a lot of the hygiene and vaccination, stuff that the Ministry of Health is prioritizing. But they also meet weekly with the community health center staff, and they are told who has hypertension, who's pregnant, who's, and they actually implement, they sort of extend the to include, they're talking about adherence to medication and so on, and adherence to village. So we decided to work at the Community Health Center, and that becomes sort of interesting later on when we talk about these issues and implications. Obviously, the first thing you do is do a study like this, you meet with the Ministry of Health. We were fortunate that they actually have a tobacco control program called Vietnamese, led by Dr. Hai, who has been in the position for a very long time, was trained in Johns Hopkins in their tobacco program, at the institution and support of Frank Stillman, who's at Hopkins for a long time, done a lot of global tobacco research. So we met with her. We had to actually get permission, and we got the grant, and then I was told by our colleague now, oh, by the way, the ministry, the government has to actually sign off on this now. And so we had to meet with them, and wanted to obviously get their buy-in. And why is that an implementation issue? Because if the Ministry of Health is funding all of health care, there's no way your program is going to be sustainable unless you actually get them to both agree but also inform the design and the policy. And what's interesting at the time is that we had to actually prove the concept that we were proposing, because at that level, Dr. Hai was working actually at the district and provincial level in hospitals, thinking that it was the expert specialist who should be doing tobacco use treatment, so pulmonologists, cardiologists at the hospital, and thought that at the community health center they actually wouldn't be able to do this. And having done this for 20 years, we can't get oncologists to train for tobacco use in this country. Specialists are not the primary entry point for this kind of work, and certainly they're not seeing most patients. So it was sort of a, actually a nice timing, because they were starting to roll out that program in these sort of higher level parts of the system, and we were saying, we're going to go into the primary health centers and show you a model that we think will work. And so the aims are, you know, and so this is a type 3 hybrid, and let me just go to the next slide for a second, for students and folks who haven't heard this terminology. Curran and others wrote a really interesting paper and on this idea of hybrid design in implementation science. And I think it was really transformative, actually, because it wasn't clear in the field of what defines an implementation study. And there are many ways you can do implementation science. And the important part of it is, so that thinking should start actually early on, even in an efficacy study. And so that was sort of the point of this, is to say, hybrid type 1, which I'm doing right now, lung cancer, working with Memorial Sloan Kettering, we have a grant from NCI to look at the effectiveness of, we're doing a remote study, multiple different patient interventions in the lung cancer screening setting. So the main aim is an effectiveness aim. Is that all these interventions effective? But the secondary aim is to gather some information on implementation. So, gee, if we can find out that people can quit in this setting using X, Y, and Z intervention, you know, we kind of want to know, you know, what were some of the implementation issues up front, like while we're trying to do this, because otherwise we've done the effectiveness study, and then we sort of, historically this is the way it was done. You know, you do this, prove it, and then you say this is effective, do this. But then all these sites bump into, you know, lung cancer screening sites, for example, all kinds of issues around, you know, workflow, how does it fit into workflow and fit, and, you know, training needs, and, you know, all kinds of sort of, we'll talk about implementation outcomes. Is it acceptable? Is it feasible? Is it appropriate for the site? And how do we adapt it, actually? What kind of adaptations may be necessary? So in that study, what we're doing is, we're doing the intervention, and then we're doing at the post-end, although we have done some both quantitative and qualitatively assessing what were the factors that sort of will influence implementation ultimately and scale up, and looking at what I'll call implementation outcomes. And that's another paper I would highly recommend you read, is the Proctor paper that actually, again, big contribution to implementation science, which is still a very new field, defining what are implementation outcomes. They're not clinical outcomes, right? They're, as I said, they're fidelity, they're cost, it's acceptability, as I said, appropriateness, fit. And she sort of really nicely outlines what these are and really help you as a researcher to sort of think about what you might want to understand, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. So that's an example of one. Type 3, we actually had, in a type 3, you have an evidence-based intervention, actually. And what you're now trying to do is test the implementation strategy. And strategy, they call them implementation strategies rather than interventions, whatever. The field language is a big problem. But what I mean by with the language, the definition of that is it's multiple levels of multiple interventions as one, and so it's sort of referring to it as implementation strategy. So this study we are calling hybrid type 3, which was all about implementation, actually studying the implementation. The secondary outcome was actually whether it was effective on attestation. That was actually a secondary outcome. The primary outcome was did the implementation strategy change provider behavior. So type 2 is like the trickiest one. I just actually put in a grant that I called it type 1, and then I wrote this presentation. It's not always, you know, that clear. But, you know, in terms of this grant writing itself, or when you're trying to kind of explain things to people, if you can explain it, you know, you just need to explain the rationale for what you're doing. But I think it helps us understand, like, what, so you could say you're doing a hybrid type 1, doing an efficacy study, but you're also kind of looking at staffing and fit and all these other issues. So that's why I'm calling type 3. So one of the things we often see in implementation science proposals and projects is like an aim 1 that actually tries to make sure that we looked at the context. In this case, we had to talk to people, and Nancy who has done a lot of this in year 1, I'm talking to Ministry of Health, talking to community organizations, understanding how it's viewed in the community at a policy level, at a community level, interviewing the doc, trying to make sure that the fit was going to be right, and making any last-minute adaptations to optimize implementation And then we did the study, which was to test these two implementation strategies. One was training and toolkit. The toolkit included a lot of things that I'll show you when I show the slide, versus that plus adding a referral system for a village health worker. Now, in our country, we're doing studies like this, but the referral systems are split line. They didn't have a national split line at the time. And honestly, I'm not sure split line, frankly, in the setting are the way to go. But it's being pushed by the World Health Organization. So actually, they have one now that's about 3 years old. But at the time, there was nobody. And so this was the outcome was increased adherence to the guidelines, and some of you may have heard this idea of the ask, advise, assist. And the assist is really brief counseling by the provider, and then the other arm had an option to refer to the village health worker. And then we had a third aim to sort of at the back end explore, sort of again, these factors that might influence ultimately implementation, scale up, sustainability. There's not a lot of research on sustainability, honestly, and I know that the Commission on Research on study section, health study section, is very interested. There's not a lot of, you don't see almost any dissemination research studies. They're hard to do, actually, rigorously, or sustainability. So it's part of the problem is it's great to end, and they're sort of like, you don't have any money, and you'll look a year later. Is this clear so far? I wanted to add this too, because again, I know some of you are new to this field. This is really a rapidly growing field, and so there's all kinds of key papers that are kind of coming out from groups like the group at State Louis, Washington University there, and North Carolina. And this was a paper. So if you're thinking of, what strategies are effective actually in helping implement evidence-based guidelines, there's been a group, the ERIC Project, Expert Recommendations for Implementing Change, who got together and did a sort of Delphi/concept mapping project. And to say, the group of implementation scientists all over and other people, what are evidence-based implementation strategies? Like what works? Training has been thought to be sort of necessary but not sufficient. Are the feedback, or a lot of this, by the way, I just should say, because I know that a lot of you probably new work, a lot of this work is being developed in health, at the health system level. It's a very predominantly a lot of literature is health systems, which I think needs to change. Honestly, there's a lot of scientists that happen at the community and policy level. But anyway, so just to give you an example of that, there actually are some evidence-based implementation strategies, so I'm going to show you the design. So this is complicated as most implementation science studies are. We recruited 26 sites and conducted a baseline assessment before we. Why is it doing that? This is a cluster randomized trial, meaning we randomize at the site level, because when you're doing system changes, unfortunately, it's very hard to randomize at the individual level because you're going to get contamination. So, especially when people live in villages where the village health workers who are doing smoking cessation counseling might say, "Oh, I just went to this field, and I know so-and-so smokes." You know who smokes? All of them know. So we were changing the system. We were training docs. We were giving them a referral system. We were providing a chart reminder system, and so we randomized by site. One of the systems it's funny because I did site visits there, and I guess I didn't pick this up because when we went to do another analysis at that primary aim 1 stage, I realized there actually were no charts. And so we have, as I did over the chart system to remind us to screen and document, and there was this just huge logbook that people just wrote their name, their age, and what they came in for, and that was it. So we had to scramble and think about, okay, how are we going to do this? We came up with a poster, actually, which is what they do a lot when we do these programs. But anyway, we use patient exit interviews to assess the provider behavior outcome, ask, advise, assess, assist. PEIs have been used a lot in tobacco. There's been some nice papers looking at triangulating, using chart review, the patient exit interview, after the patient what happens now when you first meet the doctor, and provide a report. And you can imagine the charts under document because docs don't document anything. unless you're getting effective reimbursement rates. And then doctors are notorious for over-reporting what they do. And patients seem to be the most accurate, particularly if you catch them right after the visit. So we use patient ID. It's expensive to do, and it's easier to just do better for people to the chart and do that kind of work. And we can do that here now that we have health workers and doctors are actually required to treat the vaccine. So 50 patients per site, got a baseline interview. And as I said, at baseline, we also did medical director and healthcare worker surveys and 16 form interviews. We randomized the sites. The intervention was 12 months. We had that arm 1 versus arm 2, which I described. And then at 12 months, again, we did another cross-sectional assessment of provider asked, advised, success, and refer. And then again, we did these evaluations. What's interesting is in implementation sciences, and Nancy and I found this in this first paper that she led, was that most people evaluate sort of the implementation issues at the back end. And it was actually helpful to look at it at the front end, too. Also, we wanted to see if one of the theoretical, and I'll show you the theoretical framework issues, was that we wanted to sort of test the hypothesis that a change in provider attitudes, norms, and efficacy, and like the theory of behavior, would actually mediate some of this effect we might find. The other thing that happened was because we can't get through a study section we found unless you have a patient-level outcome, and so most of the time we don't have the money to do this, but in Vietnam, because the cost of those research, we were actually able to, at each point, follow up these 50 patient exit interviews with 6-month quit rates. So we were able to look pre and post where the quit rates went up as well. I put this down because we had an amazing external advisory committee, really important group, and I'll show you why they were particularly important. We changed actually some of the design with their feedback, but they've been remarkable, and they're also champions too of the project. And they range from community-based organizations to academic, Medical University, the Public Health School, the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hai is on there as well, and they were very vocal actually about their feelings about the study. Conceptual framework, again, kind of complicated, but we're talking about a multi-level intervention. You're working at the provider level or at the system level. This issue, this theory is really in its infancy in this field. But you still have to have theory. And I'm laughing because I'm doing a study section November 2nd, and I'm reading grants, and I cannot believe people are writing grants without a conceptual, not even a conceptual framework, right? And there's a difference between like a conceptual framework or theory. I'm not going to get into that. Erin Rogers gave me a really great paper on actually on how to differentiate that if anyone wants to read that. But you don't actually even need in illustrated science sometimes I see the reviewers, we're not that hard on like you have a theory, more like you have to at least have a conceptual framework, like what informed the intervention. And so here, though, we were hypothesizing that the implementation strategies with training, with toolkits, village health worker would actually work on provider attitudes towards self-efficacy and also change priorities and climate and compatibility. That it would make it easier for them to do. We're creating an environment for them, not only their attitudes, because not only you can change their attitudes and self-efficacy with the training, but if you don't change the systems that they work in, then you're still left with that barrier. And so, the primary outcome is what Brian Weiner calls implementation effectiveness, the provider behavior, the main outcome, and then a secondary outcome is cessation. And with more qualitative measures, we were kind of wanted to make sure we were taking into account kind of what did the site think about the Ministry of Health, actually, and how it affected their work. Because here, in this setting, they're not autonomous actors. In the U.S., doctors are a little too autonomous. And, it's so incredibly different there. Doctors don't feel like they can, have agency, so to speak, to make changes. I just want to show this table because it's sort of a grant thing. It's not like perfect, frankly, for this study. In the dental study, I believe we got a perfect score on that grant because of this table. And what I'm trying to say is like when you really go full scale on like the theory, then you can link your intervention component to what you think they're going to change and then ultimately the main outcome. And this isn't perfect, there's overlap. In the duet study, we actually really lined it up nicely. But I think as an exercise yourself, you should be thinking about this. It matters. What do you think? How do you think the intervention is going to work? So I always talk about the straight line from aims, research questions, to theoretical framework, to the intervention components, to the measures and the outcomes. And they all have to be aligned. And if they're not, it's really hard on the back end to make sense of what you did. So I just put this in at the last minute just because it's really changed the way I think about my own work by doing it.
Are you also measuring then
Oh, we're measuring all of those.
You're measuring, and so it's easy of it really, but you're measuring the increase in knowledge along the way.
Right. So you think you're intervention. So there's a theory of process. But this is, I see this all the time. People throw out theory, and then they have no measures, actually, to measure the constructs that they think are changing. And, I mean, I guess I'm feeling obviously frustrated by that, but it seems so obvious now to me, now that I've been doing it, but when I was an early researcher too, I made the mistake of not really thinking about these things, honestly.
So for system changes, were there some indicators that you could actually use, or did you have to develop your own indicators?
Oh, in terms of measures of means,
Because the change climate and priorities.
So there's a climate survey we use, actually. There are measures, in fact, Brian Weiner from the University of Washington is doing such great work on measures. He's actually developing measures. Proctor put out that great paper on outcomes, but there were no measures for acceptability, appropriateness. And so that was the next step, and he got a grant, actually, with Carol Lewis to develop. He just came out with a paper, I didn't realize it, that they actually were proposing some measures that we're actually using in another grant. But he has a measure of climate. Now, I didn't know whether that was going to work. Because one of the things he's interested in, now that he's in the global public health group there, I don't know what it's called, what do you know? But he was very interested in the paper Nancy led, in how we talk about how does some of these frameworks and theories apply in that setting, and the measures and the tools. And the climate tool completely failed. They're not used to getting asked about how they feel about their workplace, and, do they get the support? And the problem is a real response bias there. We saw everybody said strongly agree on every single one. It's like a 5 or 6 question tool, and it was useless. And we met with Brian actually when he came to talk at Peter, and it was really, we weren't upset about it. We were actually excited about it. It was kind of interesting to see that there's a lot of work. If we want to start to think about these as arguably, frankly, do these explain behavior change or changes in implementation of evidence-based guidance? Maybe climate is an important measure in this setting, but we don't know yet because we don't really know how to. And what was interesting is they said, "Oh, everything's so great, so great, so great." And then when we did qualitatively, we looked at. Then they were much more honest about what was happening. I think one-on-one they believed it was maybe there was a fear of non-confidentiality. There's a higher thing even in the system. There's only been one doctor per health center, and then there's a midwife and maybe a nurse or 2 nurses, and how big the community is. And there's definitely the medical director is a doctor. And so there's even a little bit of a issue maybe there in terms of being able to feel like you're confident in talking about this. So yes, we had measures for all of these concepts.
One comment. One of the useful questions to ask when you're designing a study like this and putting in the measures is, what will I learn if the outcome doesn't happen? If I get no effect, will I be able to track back in the pathways to which dose or element didn't work, should have worked, so that I will learn something for the next study? Mm-hmm. And I think people asking that question forces you to put some of these things in. What am I going to measure that I'll understand if this doesn't work?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the whole rationale for doing this even in early stage research. Mm-hmm. Because, right, it's that black box thing. Well, what happened? A lot of times it was fidelity on it. People didn't get the intervention, actually. And, that idea of fidelity has been around a long time. It's now been very much adopted as an implementation best outcome. But yeah, I think it's a really good point. So just to show you what the measures were, as I said, the primary outcome was adherence. Oh, it's 4 a.m. Sorry. Secondary outcome was carbon monoxide validated cessation. Actually, it was 3 and 6 months. We were also doing cost effectiveness analysis, which was we had templates. We actually have a colleague at the Public Health School in Hanoi who has done cost effectiveness analysis and health systems in Vietnamese, who had these great data collection tools and was able to train everybody. And so we didn't even have to superimpose our own sort of Western, templates and things like that. It actually was really simple, honestly. And I've taken those tools and brought them back to our own team to sort of say, gosh, this is really straightforward. It's easy to collect this stuff when you kind of outline it in a simple way. Fidelity, there's a whole bunch of things, looked at. And then this, I'm calling these separate constructs, but they're also, I'll explain that later. But so we were looking at the ones we measured, though, were climate priority. Those were the quantitative studies of sort of the inner setting. And so, except for, let me explain that in a second. But anyway, I put a table like this in all my grants. It's just really helpful for viewers. I don't know if any of you are running grants or not, but to have a table that really explains in a short way, like what's the primary and secondary outcomes, the measures of the data source, and when that happens. So yeah, I jumped the gun on showing the measures because I didn't explain what CFIR is. This is another real contribution to implementation science. My colleague Laura Damschroeder created this. She's in the VA system, which is sort of way ahead of everybody else on all improvement research and implementation science. And what she did was took this enormous literature, and there was a lot of literature in sort of the organizational research domain that Tom DeAnno, our colleague at Ladner, is very involved in. And to summarize, and it's an amazing paper, I read it several times, it was published in 2009, summarized all this literature and came up with these domains that matter. And then the constructs within those domains. And so what this is about is, based on the literature, this is what influences whether something can get implemented effectively or not. Simply said. What's interesting about this is not a theoretical framework, right? This is a conceptual framework, but within it are theories. Like, think about the individual characteristics, theory on behavior, the integrated behavioral theory. So it wasn't like, and the intersetting construct came from a lot of research on organizational change. And so within there are, and the diffusion of innovation was the intervention characteristics of anything you read Roger's book. I highly recommend it. It's, what's the relative advantage of the intervention, the complexity, the design and packaging, trialability. So there are theories within this. The idea is that you don't have to use all of this, obviously. You're not going to measure everything in this. But it's really helpful as a guide of what you might want to measure to understand what the barriers and facilitators of implementation are during the study. And she's done, this thing is unique. Why? Because we developed a new conceptual framework. Take a tip from Laura Damschroeder. She has an amazing website, CFIR.org. It has examples of qualitative interview guides, just like a lot of examples of how people use the framework. So she's made this thing really user-friendly, and you see this popping up in a lot of the grants that I've reviewed in implementation science. But I think, if you're doing, whatever work you're doing, you want to think about what are the factors that might influence whether this is effective or not. This is a nice guide. There are other ones, by the way. If you look at one where there's a paper by Payback, P-A-B-A-C-K, or P-A-B-A-C-K. Yeah, that does a really nice job of summarizing all the implementation and dissemination frameworks. And really, it's a very nice paper. And you can just go straight to the table, and you see that.
I'd love to focus on theories like this. Yeah. So, are these, for instance, the characteristics of individuals, to what degree are those constructs actually part of the active components of the intervention that's being delivered? Is there any, you can imagine things that seem some rare examples where it goes down to a scripted level of delivery and addressing these factors, or is this more assessment?
Well, I think, I mean, I
You're probably gonna get this.
you know, I do this whole thing on there, but if you think about this, I took out the individual characteristics basically we wanted to measure. And yes, we hypothesized that, you know, honestly what we see in that, I think, maybe, I don't know, Nancy, but I feel like the big impact of it, and we had these interventions that were supposedly going to change their attitudes about their role, which actually were pretty positive to start with. Interestingly, norms and attitudes were pretty positive to start with. The impact, we really felt like the training and the systems we gave them, you'll see, would impact self-efficacy the most, because at baseline, the self-efficacy was very low. They had no confidence they could do this, because they had never had any training. So yes, the intervention was, is that what you're asking? The intervention components were focused on addressing sort of this lack of confidence. Maybe they didn't see it as their role, you
It
know.
isn't perfect asking how explicit was it, you know, like, the concept of norms, for instance, is that something that would be part of the conversation, or was it more?
No, it wasn't actually, that's a great question. Actually, it wasn't explicit, yeah. Yeah.
Not many of this.
No, but it's interesting to think about, honestly. You know, what we, you know, the questions, sort of some of these validate questions, which work well, honestly, in studying too, that people were, yeah, I think the assumption was that and we see that norms, frankly, and organizational priorities sort of overlap a little bit, that it would become a normal thing to do this, that you know, and this idea that, right, that this could be implemented into their role and expected of them, and by their supervisors and whatever the situation. But we didn't talk about it in training. It wasn't explicit. This is so remember I said we did that A1, year one, qualitative work. I'm just going to present some stuff. So this is what we found in the baseline, and it actually changed some of the intervention components actually based on this. So it's really helpful to talk to doctors and nurses. They really lack confidence, and when the program against cigarette smoking is new, you know, we want to get trained properly. They know that everybody's all men smoke. They endorsed the village health worker role, but they were concerned about the fit in their current workflow. And I thought the most interesting comment, honestly, was this one. Because normally we offer treatment and make prescriptions, but now we have to offer consultation as well. And that went to this issue of transforming from focus on infectious disease and that's what if you read the whole thing, the context was the transition to chronic care. So delivery of chronic care, managing chronic care disease, this idea of behavior change and how would we actually talk to people about changing their behavior, which are ways that all these chronic diseases are starting to see people smoking anyway. But they have a big problem with hypertension. They have a huge problem actually with alcohol abuse. So it was kind of interesting that they were sort of saying like, how does this fit in? They literally like see people, you know, boom, and then this issue came up at baseline, big one, which is prioritizing by the Ministry of Health. I assume there are more urgent issues, so this is not receiving equal attention. And so that was our clue. You know, not that we weren't meeting with the Ministry of Health, but we doubled down on that. Every time I go there, I like to meet with the tobacco control person, the Ministry of Health, and my colleague now, says, why don't you do this? And I said, because she needs to see what we're doing and understand that they want help at the community level, and they're not getting it. So this is intervention components, the training, and the team in Vietnam was unbelievable. So what we did was we added a booster training, 6 months, maybe it was 3 or 6 months, which was very much appreciated. They created a video, which is, I trained them, and they took it and they went like 100 steps further. One was acting as a doctor, the other as a patient, and had this incredible video of them in Vietnamese, obviously, doing what we just talked about. And then we have also made it very skill-based. And most of their training, and we heard this in some of the qualitative work, is not very skill-based. It's actually just adaptive. And saw that as a huge advantage. So we did a ton of role playing. Now, in this setting, we were able to take them out of their workplace for 3 days, which is unheard of in the US. And then the field trip workers had another 3 or 4 days of training. But a lot of role playing and so engaged. You know, I don't know if this is the time I went. Like at one point during this place, it was like 102 degrees in the room. And I looked at Now and I said, if this was in the US, nobody would be here. Like if the air conditioning broke. I mean, there really was no air conditioning. Actually, there was something in the back and it wasn't working. But I was astonished. Now, obviously, I'm not acclimated to the heat there, but people really stayed and listened and were engaged. And this is 2 of the nurses role playing one of the case studies. And then there were these other pieces. So we came up with this poster that said, ask, advise, assess, assist. And then in a referral site that had the extra refer. So it was in all the rooms. And then this also, they added, I mean, one of the things is our partners knew much more than we did about what to do there, actually. I would never do this in the US, actually, put a little tabletop on something station. But there were some comments about that in the qualitative data on how much they appreciated having that, you know, this is the first time they learned about this. And then we're sort of throwing that out there and deal with it. This had all kinds of tips on like what to say, like scripted, you know, which is definitely the way. And then, of course, we created all these brochures, one on smoke-free housing, phones, one on cessation. I can't remember what the third one was. And they were the ones to design. I gave them examples, and then they tested them, and tested them again, and tested them a third time. And the colors, you know, everything about it was not necessarily what I would have done, but we really handed that over to them. Here's the content we think you should cover. Create something that's culturally relevant. This is the English version of a referral form. So they had referral forms where the village health worker could pick these up at the end of the week. And so that was, you know, part of the intervention too. So, you know, when we talk about system changes, I call these system changes, and technically, I guess maybe some people wouldn't, but this was our version of a reminder system, the poster, and having this flip chart and the educational material. We do talk a lot about toolkits, and so thought of this extra toolkit. But it really changed the environment. Think about this, right? Everywhere they went, you know, this was sort of this new priority. Whether that's sustainable, and, you know, next time they're going to have a nutrition program, the posters will come down, the nutrition posters will come up. You know, it's tricky. So finding the outcomes. So, you know, the big question about cross-sectional, were the two populations the same? And so we have about 400 in each intervention, pre and post, and there was really no difference between them. Actually, I'm not showing the significance, but water pipe use was a little higher post, but pretty much the same. By the way, water pipe use was much higher. And the gas is 13%. It was 18% water pipe only, but it was like 34% or so dual. So more people were using water pipe than cigarette alone. And that actually became a really interesting opportunity for us to add some water pipe literature. Omar El-Shawari is writing a couple papers with us on the water pipe data. So, boy, can you make an impact when you go into a site and they have like nothing there, so this virgin territory. This is the change in provider adherence to the guidelines. So ARM 1 and 2, by the way, I'm not going to show you that, are not significantly different. What I think is really interesting is, so they went from 0 to 100, you know, like miles per hour. They were asking a little bit, and some of them were even advising people to quit, but they weren't really counseling. And the information, like giving them brochures, they really were not. I don't have the referral data here, but there were about 61% of patient smokers were referred actually to those health workers. So that was a pretty high referral rate, actually. But what's interesting to me is look at this, the counseling, assist counseling was higher than in the ARM 2. And I think we saw this as maybe one of our studies, because my theory about it, and it wasn't significant, but it was a lot higher. And what I've seen in the US and Europe, when we've done a study with providers, is once you give them an option to send out the patient for counseling, they don't do it anymore. And our quit line is very expensive. They feel like when you do the ask, advise, refer model, docs are just completely disengaging. They're just sort of asking, maybe they're advising to quit, but they're just referring patients to quit line. And so maybe the docs knew, they didn't really need to provide counseling because they were sending them to the trouble. Regardless, what I took home from this, honestly, is that, we also talk about training is not going to change behavior. But when you, again, go to a group that has no information, where the attention for change is very high because this is a big problem, and they just feel like they have no skill to do this, and you train them. I mean, we had, obviously, the system changes were there too. And give them the tools, the materials to get to the patients, which they really appreciate it. It was remarkable. Is it sustainable? I don't know yet. But the change was remarkable. And so if you wanted to do anything as a low-income country, put together a train-the-trainer program, which we actually got money from Global Bridges to do, Nam and I. We got money from them they're actually trying to do this, create curriculum globally. And with that money, we turned our curriculum into a train-the-trainer program, and they're on the road and putting this online. And, at a minimum, a country could just train their healthcare system of providers to do smoking cessation counseling. You might see change. But what's interesting, too, is we looked at, this is combining on 1 and 2, because there was no difference anyway. Much less likely to, not, I don't know if this is significant yet, but asking, advising, and across all of the way, they were less likely to engage with what they thought were water pipe users. So it seems like the smoking status is what drives, what they're doing. And by the way, we added water when we saw how many water pipe users there were early on. I forget how we knew that. You know what it was? It was the baseline patient interviews. We asked, and then we saw how many there were. And we changed the survey so that we could literally, really capture the behavior of water pipe use. Like addiction, we added questions about water pipe use specifically. We have sort of general tobacco use questions. Anyway, so this is the data on the provider attitudes. And what was really interesting is, as you see here, their attitudes about their roles and towards treating tobacco use, or I should say, as the roles were more in the norm section, but their attitudes, that this was important, that patients really needed this, and that it was their actual role. It went up, but it started pretty high. But you see here that this conference is extraordinarily low. And we did 6 months and 12 months. It was nice to see that it went up and stayed. I don't know why their attitudes went down and went up, but that is never perfect. So any questions about that? This sort of outcome, although it's kind of, it was significant. And I just wanted to add this, I don't know if I have time. Just to say that, our first meeting with our advisory group, everybody, did you ever see the body language and now presented? We didn't really have a great, translator, which was so perfect actually, because you could sit in the room. It was that fascinating and know that things were going south. And I told him the presentation first of all, he wasn't presenting this kind of information to a group of sort of policy people, and it was a disaster, first of all. They didn't understand it, and they really didn't understand that the main outcome was the provider level outcome. They wanted to know why we weren't measuring cessation, or the effectiveness of the village health workers. And I realized I made a really Western assumption, actually, because we already know the quit line is effective, so it becomes more of an implementation strategy to have that referral. We don't need to test quit line effectiveness, we're sort of just saying it. But the fact of the matter is, we don't know if those health workers are going to be effective counselors. So I was intrigued by that. Again, since money is fungible, I mean, he seemed to have leftover money from the subcontract we gave him, and really frankly was also realizing he had to respond to this critique. So we quickly put together a quasi-experimental study where we, which was a lot of work, but so worth it, to understand the effectiveness of the intervention as best as we could. And so we actually followed people during the intervention period, right? So the main outcome was analyzed pre-post by people who were just leaving, the site. But this time we were looking actually during the intervention period at people who just were referred, who basically, let's assume they got brief counseling, the screening brief counseling, versus they got brief counseling and then also had this intensive counseling for the village health worker. And we did not include the nicotine replacement therapy, by the way, and I included a whole rationale for that in the grant because people always question why you're not using medications, especially if they don't work in places like this. There was literally, NRT was not available. It wasn't even legal to sell it. Like, it was not available. The Ministry of Health just started a company, actually, it's producing nicotine replacement therapy. So I, being interested in information science and sustainability, thought, like, why are we going to measure using this product that's never going to be available? And by the way, there were points in their epidemic where we were, in the 1970s, where they're just learning this is bad for them. I hypothesized, frankly, with a little push by the village health worker, we get good quit rates, and because this is still a general population smoker, it's not what we're seeing here, which is people with comorbidities and all the stressors and barriers. So I didn't even know whether we needed it. And I thought it was important from a policy perspective to prove that, in fact, people could quit with just the village health worker, because that's the infrastructure they had. They didn't have any NRT, so why test it? I actually just submitted a grant to work in HIV clinics there. NCI is doing a big push on HIV and tobacco. They have a CAR, program announcements for domestic research and for country research. There we are using NRT because it's now available and because this population we know has a much harder time quitting. But anyway, so we had this study. We looked at 3 and 6 months. We had 1,300 patients. This is, we just actually published this in NPR. It's not, like, it may be online, but not printed yet. Let me explain what we're seeing here. So arm 1 is the dark gray, the ones who just assumed that they got the intervention brief counseling. Again, we don't know necessarily whether they got it or not, by the way. This is arm 1, this is arm 2. So people who got the village health worker counseling had an OR of about 3 here. And interestingly, what I thought was so interesting is that the effect was highest for cigarette smokers because the intervention was designed for cigarette smokers. So it implies that maybe you need to adapt it. But look at this. I mean, even without that, I think the village health workers were incredible, by the way. I mean, these were not very highly educated people. Now, we were doing if people want to know more about how we implemented it, like we had supervision, we measured fidelity. We actually, they don't see taping, so we had someone show up 10% of the visit and document fidelity. But there wasn't, obviously, we had like a lot, we had like, I don't know, 40 to 50 village health workers doing this. The quality control was tricky. But even with all that, you see this effect size, which is pretty remarkable. So that was sort of exciting to see. It's not the last word on it. It's a quasi experimental design, but we were glad we did this. And the CO confirmed, by the way, how not they confirmed.
It's continuous abstinence for 6 months or 7 days?
It was 7 days, although we, 7 days. Right.
That's 6 months.
So I should actually ask you for that. Anyway, Nancy's just sort of finishing up the qualitative assessment, the post, and I'm just reminding you of the, so I talked about a couple of things, by the way, of measures, and so, what I started doing in my project is thinking about, there's some overlap between the CFIR model, this model, and Proctor, I should have shown Proctor's outcome measures, and Proctor's outcome measures a little bit, but not totally, not really. And so I started to combine those two sort of frameworks because, this is more about qualitatively kind of thinking about, and some of these are obviously potential outcomes. I mean, with climate change, but we did, in the HIV study, we're looking at specifically at some of Proctor's outcomes, but in the post period, we're also looking at this. So, I mean, basically every study I do like this, we do a post intervention assessment qualitatively, and also, some quantitative data to understand what happened. And in this setting in particular, since our quantitative survey tools are we don't know if they're really perfect yet, the qualitative data is really critical. And so this guided, the interview guide was guided by these constructs. And there were 52 key informants. And this is just some examples. I don't have a lot of time, so I don't want to, bore you with the details, but, they just thought the training was absolutely fantastic, and we thought so too. But it was nice to hear them say that. And that was like uniform, right? There was really no criticism on it at all. There was some negative statements about the fit, but I'll get to that. But really, so appreciative. And also what I really was excited about seeing was that we kind of nailed the design of stuff. Like, the packet, the flip chart and the brochures that, it's not, I can imagine what the Ministry of Health usually puts out, So this idea that it's not as long as those in other programs, so people didn't hesitate on looking at it, And it's impossible to provide counseling without this material. So this was referencing the flip chart. So during the medical exam, we could glance over the card to see what we should talk about in the order of the steps. And there was one other, quotation that said, after a while we knew what to do, and we didn't. I didn't need it anymore, but that's fine. So what's the outer setting, right? And it talks about patient needs, which I think is odd because it's also an inner setting issue. But from the separate model, it speaks to is this an important issue epidemiologically? And the patients found it helpful, but there was a lot of demand for medication, and I'm hearing that a lot. This idea that we need medication to treat this issue, and one of them saying there's no reason to advise without providing medication. And one of the things we haven't done yet, actually, is to give them back the data, honestly, the results, which I'm realizing I think it's just being something now. To show them that actually people quit without medication. But it came up again, not as much as the baseline, which I thought was interesting, and I have a hypothesis about it, is that, again, coming up, this is not an MLH priority, so although this all was great, maybe this isn't sustainable, I think they were so interested and excited about what had happened that they were more willing to maybe do this without them. And we did see that in the quote, that we're going to continue doing this without them. Most reported a positive experience, said it's integrated into our work, it takes only a few minutes, so this was, with the baseline, they were worried about that. But there were some comments about, when we're really busy, this is really hard to do, which is what Frank Stock say in the U.S. too, after the self-efficacy thing, I was more confident. Encourages through the individual knowledge and belief. I'll skip over that just to say. So in the baseline qualitative paper, one of the things that was commented on in the discussion is how in a country like Vietnam, the outer setting and inner setting overlap. And it's really interesting to think about that, actually, because in the U.S., they do and they don't. Obviously, regs affect the way doctors, act, especially when there's, financial incentives around that. But here, they literally kind of have no autonomy. And this is from baseline, actually, data. We're doing what they tell us to do. And this is also a potential barrier to sustainability, honestly. And it is a lot of quotes, but if it's not a priority, when they're not be able to do it, it's impossible to make. And this issue with the referral is a big one because we were paying them an extra incentive to do this project because they are incredibly busy and they get paid very, very little. And so there was this feeling like, and if they're right, now that the VHW is going to pay for this, are they still doing it? And, we don't know that yet. They still, but it's funny because they said, we're hoping to keep all these materials, but that's also a funding issue. It's like with any research project you do. When the funding goes away, oftentimes the intervention goes away. But there's this incredible community commitment. It's really inspiring, honestly, to see how committed the providers are to their patients. And, you know, there's one quote that talked about working with the party committee and the people's committee to maybe locally get funds to continue to work. I'm sorry I rushed through this, but I want to get to, you know, this is questionable. But in summary, there was satisfaction with the materials and training, but clearly ongoing training and support may be needed. There were a couple of quotes from the medical directors that they felt that some of the staff really weren't up to speed in terms of, you know, to deliver this. Varying levels of expertise, but it was acceptable to most patients, but then again, I was requesting medication. One thing that came out of this is, and one of the follow-up studies we didn't write up yet, but another grant maybe to follow up on this is that we found from a lot of people that a lot of men don't come to, it's like in the ER, mostly women go to these community health centers. And that was the case here, but women don't go up there. So the village health workers could actually do a lot of this work in the city. And so that was an interesting recommendation. So we show that we can adapt evidence-based guidelines using these implementation strategies that we did to a low-income country. And, you know, many of you know Gbenga Ogedegbe talks about this idea of cash shifting. And I didn't really think about it that way, but really that's what's giving docs the opportunity to delegate the intensive counseling to a village health worker is a form of cash shifting. But, you know, in this setting, early engagement with the Ministry of Health is critical. They were very impressed by this, changed their attitude towards the common health centers as a place where this work can be done. And then, again, the water pipe use issue is big, and what's important to understand is the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control doesn't speak to water pipe use, actually. And all the advertising that's going on in these countries is about cigarettes. And there's nothing out there about water pipes and the dangers of water pipes. And we're just starting to come out with CDC stuff. So I'll end there. And here's the team. Python from Vinakash and the Ministry of Health. And the one where I've learned.
So I'll just, before I open up the floor, I think my question is always a general question. How did you get into this field, particularly of implementation science, first year?
Actually, I was at Columbia in SMS, and the state health department put out a request for proposals. I was actually director of the tobacco control program at the city health department at the very beginning of that program, when we had gotten that national and I don't know why, but hired to run that program. So I became, and just fell in love with this field. I remember calling my husband at the first tobacco meeting I went to, it was the public health one in Florida, saying, "Oh my God, I found my people." Like, it's almost like being at, you know, an abortion rally, like a pro-choice rally. That's how passionate these people are about this issue, and so interdisciplinary. And so I went to Columbia and started doing research in tobacco, but then thought I should apply for our state is the only state that funds dissemination of the tobacco use treatment guidelines, actually. So there was this health system change. I had some money from ARC that Jennifer and I worked on projects with some Agency for Health Research Quality funding, but I thought it was an opportunity to get funding that wasn't attached to a grant. And I'm in my 15th year of this funding, by the way, It's actually a learning laboratory. So we get to work with all these, now we're working in behavioral health sites to try and understand system changes. Like, how do you get providers to stop this? So provider, again, so you have multiple. Now, this has been a time when the word implementation science literally didn't exist. And it was under the umbrella of health services research. So anyway, that was sort of my start with saying, and then when I started reading more and more about implementation science, I realized, well, that's what I'm doing. And NIH held the first training, the week-long training in North Carolina. They've changed the training now, it's not on site anymore, really. But amazing training. I was the first class, I'm probably one of the oldest people there. They really focused more on the junior faculty. And that was sort of the turning point. Also, the dissemination implementation research on health study section was a game changer because it created a study section where you have experts who really understand the field and the science. These grants are very different than clinical trial grants. And they weren't getting funded, honestly, in other study sections. Even in the beginning, it was interesting. The first 3 years, nothing really got funded because as this SRO was sent to the New York to and NCI was pushing this, tried to understand who there was really no expertise. It was one of the reasons they started the training program. So you see a lot of I served on the study section for a while. And I saw all my old friends from my training, like a lot of the trainees and were sitting on the study section. So it was really brilliant. But that's, I got that with my first, what I didn't even think of as a system science grant, or implementation science grant through the state. And so, those kind of grants are really helpful. I was told not to go for that grant, actually. That's how it's not going to help your career, it's not going to, and it is, again, because of the work I did there, I was able to leverage that to get, NIH grants, then our grants, or healthcare research quality is really out for this research funded federally. So that, I'm sorry, it's a long answer, but that's the beginning of that.
Yeah, my question is about the sustainability part. It's
Yeah.
really, really exciting. I'm thinking about it from the perspective of the Minister of Health. And so she presumably would have to then carve out, set aside a budget for it, negotiate with the Minister of Finance, and have it be an ongoing program in order to make it successful. So you'd have to, in a way, convince her that the investment is worthwhile, and she would have to then convince the Minister of Finance.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that there's a lot here to make an investment case around the platform that you could present to the Minister of Health. It would be really interesting in sustainability. So that it doesn't go away.
Right, and I think to be the point that I didn't actually realize, because I thought that, I'm working with the tobacco head, she's not the head of the Ministry of Health, and none of them, she's a program within the Ministry of Health. But then you're right, like there's all these other ministries that interact, and they don't necessarily do that. I think I got lucky with the in Vietnam, and actually, interestingly, I got everybody that I had to it's oftentimes how people end up in these countries. It's a former PhD student from Columbia, worked with me at UN, as DRPH at Columbia, through SMS, and went on to do great things. I got very lucky. He was moved from his mentor. I was asked to mentor him. I was just starting out my research career with the award, and he was transformative. But they just, they don't put every single World Health Organization to thing. They created a tobacco fund through tax money. So now she's got money, her own money, and can do something with that. I think that's part of the problem is, that data on the budget. I told you that study that Martin Law and colleagues did. Only 20% before they had a budget for Article 14, essentially. So yeah, I think those are, one of the things that we want to do is that the village health workers, if they wanted village health workers to do this, they could take this training and include it in the training that they do. They do a ton of training with village health. But what we heard in the qualitative data was literally the Ministry of Health has to say, this is another one of our top, it's not even still defined as one of their top 12 priorities, like 12 priority areas, which is part of the problem. But that's where funds flow. So I think that's where the advocacy has to go, and working with Dr. Hyde to sort of get that up there. It's not enough just to have the tobacco fund, because if you want this model to go, you have to have the Ministry of Health who really oversees all of the training and the funding of the health workers to adopt that. In terms of training the providers, I think she's got the budget and the resources to sort of take. And interestingly, they had a curriculum they're using. They've adopted our curriculum for their training nationally in their hospital. And that was very exciting. Now, the World Health Organization has created an amazing training, actually, many modules for healthcare workers and mental health that can be adapted. But that's this training is now. So I think we're gaining ground in that way, that she would adopt the training and sort of valuing that piece. But I think you're right. I think it's, in other countries, it's a steep hill to climb, even when you have the data.
Two questions. One is, let's deal with a question and a comment. On the data that showed that those who were combustible, tobacco smokers as opposed to cigar smokers, much more likely to quit. Obviously, there's a selection there. And then the second observation is in Vietnam, I think the current rate of nicotine smoking is around 5%. And internationally, what we see is a laser focus by the tobacco industry on moving in communities once they get that level of foothold in the 3%, because that's their next, potential run-up of customers. So it would be interesting if you stay in Vietnam doing this to maybe think about a primary prevention arm within these settings focused on women, maybe focused on alerting them to the extent to which they're a target, and the industry's in target practice with them. Because absent that rate will rise. It's not going to stay at 5%. At least if the pattern in other countries is that. For example, I was thinking right off the bat, I think it was Donna's rates here. Among adult women, the rate is something like 2%, and among adolescent women, it's 11%. So it just goes to show you the cohort mobility that's happening. Right. And even there's really virtually no physical adolescence.
I can say that in the, we did include in the quantitative assessments of that study population, where it's like the lifetime users were less likely, but a question about risk perception, and they definitely thought it was a favor. And I think that goes to the idea that there is no marketing counter advertising campaign around water type use.
I thought it was social.
It's really fascinating the way it works there. Yeah, I mean, it literally was. You could go to restaurant to restaurant and walk down a street and walk into a restaurant. They'd have the water pipe. It's kind of disgusting, actually. There's no hygiene. People go in and they use the pipe, and then they go to the next. But as we were eating dinner in one of these restaurants, and we saw people coming in and out using this pipe. I think they were paying a little something for it, but so it's. And then you'll see men sitting on a corner, like huddled around for them, using one of these pipes. They're different.
Tobacco or is it tobacco combined?
I don't know, actually.
That might keep probably a lot of that too.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's a really good question, actually. So it is social. It's higher in rural. We were in a rural setting, by the way. We were in Thailand, which is about an hour north of Hanoi, and the gas does show that living in rural settings is higher. Although I have to say, when I go to Hanoi, I see a lot of men on the street smoking, using pipes. And instead in restaurants all over the place. It's like go to the bar and have a drink while you wait for your it's like have a puff of water pipe. So
common with certain age groups there.
I think it's going to get less. I do think it's older. Yeah, I mean, again, based on gas, being older. I don't think. And what's interesting though too, we did have the e-cigarettes. It's not even like on the radar yet, but it's coming, I'm sure. But yeah, it's more common among older people. So I do think. But in terms of, I can only say that we didn't anticipate such a high rate of water pipe use, and so as I said, we added on the water pipe training piece at the second training, and then the booster training for the first group included it. But it was very minimal. We said about it, and it wasn't in the manual. We had a 3-session manual that we trained the VHW students. And we talked a little bit about it with them, but that to use the same approach as they would, but we realized that that's probably not as effective because they don't need water pipes. The triggers are probably different. And so I think, it would be great to be able to adapt what we have and see if we could actually make it impact. Although I think that the population level policy stuff has to match that. Like I just feel like the first thing they need to do is get the advertising stuff.
That's the question. Do the cigarette that users also use water pipe, or is there an overlap between those two? Because what I have observed, in some places, water pipe is coming back. It was part of the culture before, for instance, in Turkey. And I see a lot of water pipe use from, over the course of decades, but young people actually use it as opposed to the Vietnamese population. I was saying that the old people. So there's some sort of an interesting dynamic going on, and I don't know if you know anything about the overlapping population,
Well, what we saw
or
was,
there's a shift, or
I don't think I showed you the percentage, but they were about, it was like 30, well, no, maybe like 40, 30, 20 or something. They were about 34 or 35% with dual users. And now Amar is doing this analysis, they're highly addicted. You would assume they were, but maybe not. Maybe they just like tough a little bit, but these actually analysis based on our quantitative survey look at addiction levels. We developed a survey, by the way, before people started publishing on how do you measure addiction and blood testing. Do you use 5 minutes to wake up and begin smoking within 5 minutes? And people generally don't use water pipes that way. But it was high. It was like over 30% with dual users. But again, it was this rural area. But even in Hanoi, the men sitting around smoking are older.
You mentioned risk perception, but do you have a feel for the relative perception of risk between combustible and the water pipes?
Look at that. That's an interesting question. We probably can analyze that, actually. Yeah.
Where the dual users actually think they're offsetting risk in some way.
Yeah. Well, it's like this question of use of e-cigarettes and smoking cigarettes. Like combustible, like people are displacing them because they think maybe it's a harm reduction approach. So that's an interesting question. Again, we didn't get into that in too much detail. I think this is a big area for work.
I think this is why you increasing in young population use because issue. And there's a lot of misinformation.
Yeah.
I have experience with growing up in Turkey. I think this happens like this. It's unfolded. And then you could see that it's false because they would like to shift, behavior.
Yeah.
Something that they think that.
And we saw in our community, we did a survey of community students, it's very high rate of water testing. Particularly among students of, Middle Eastern background, and that's like 25%. I mean, actually, the e-cigarette use is only about 4%. So it may be growing for a lot of people. Again, it becomes a social norm. It's hard to say, but it's funny right now. Actually, it just seems like in Vietnam, and I don't know if this is true in other places where water type use is high, that it's not that young people are not necessarily taking it up. It's also a different kind of thing. It's a huge pipe. It's not like these nice little looking glass or what they use in Turkey or
travel Russian.
Yeah. It almost looks like a musical instrument.
So you also mentioned that you collected some post data related to the program. Was that at all any help in your dissemination or your communication with?
Yeah, I'm meeting with this person, cost person in December when I go to Vietnam again, because I had a lot of questions about, honestly, the analysis. And it looks like actually the 2 arms cost the same. And I know that the village health workers don't get paid anything, but still you'd expect it to be a little more expensive. So we need to look at that data again. But also to me, if it's sustainable, it's going to have to cost more. I mean, we need to, honestly, they have a big problem with paying us. The village health workers are so underpaid and play such a crucial role that, I don't think they've understood how that affects quality and how that affects, their implementation of the priority program. But it's so stunning when I look at the data, and I remember, and saying, wait, $2. It's very inexpensive, period, but you would expect to see a little bit more cost. But now, one of the things, it was just that was paper, the data they sent me was just literally the cost on the 2 arms. you know, we have to, look at the effectiveness and, we haven't looked at that, you know, the cost, we look at cost effectiveness and change it a little bit, but still, it's solid, because it's, I don't think that should be more. Yeah.
But I think that you've done it, and the fact that it's inexpensive is already so important. I mean, I was just thinking that some of the work we were doing in Senegal, we designed something that at the outset, I think the people we work with assumed it was going to be very expensive, very difficult to do, and would take a long time, and it's probably something that wasn't worth even trying.
Yeah.
And then after we did it and showed that it could be done very quickly and very inexpensively, all of a sudden that just opened up all kinds of removed all kinds of barriers, and I think that seems to be exactly what we've done there.
Yeah, and it's funny because we have a cost person in the U.S., Heather Gold, who is great now, and kind of stepped back because this person in Vietnam was doing it, and there's some issues with the way, you know, it's done, but honestly, the advantage of this person in Vietnam, who has a lot, very high status, he actually does the gas facilities and is very connected with the Ministry of Health and does tobacco work. It's really helpful too, I think, you know. I mean, one of the hard things about doing work, anybody does that work, you lose control. Like, at the beginning, I was control freak, and it was very hard for me to realize that I had no control over what was happening there. I mean, obviously you're there, you have to go frequently, and I can only handle it twice a year, which is massive. But I wish I could go 4 times a year, because being there makes all the difference. We do have conference calls, and it's just not adequate, honestly, because there's all kinds of communication, age barriers that are cultural. You know, we're very straightforward, you know, we sit down in a meeting, and we get right to the agenda, there's a half an hour tea, and you know, fun times, and, you know, and it's, you know, and it's wonderful and delightful, and actually it's kind of relief. Sometimes it's like, we could do that here. But, you know, maybe here. But yeah, so I guess, one of the things I really learned was, first of all, trust my colleagues, you know, that they really outstanding people, honestly, and, you know, they took what we created and they went so much better because they just knew what they were. You know what they did too, which I thought, this book seems so ridiculous in our context. They gave certificates out at, I wish I showed a picture of it, at every training at the end, everybody else. And they told me, and I think them with but me and we were there, hugging and kissing us, taking pictures with us, with that. First of all, they're so honored that we came all the way there. So being there is everything, you know. One of the persons said to me, someone from another university, Nam always says, Donna comes to me, and I make the effort to, you know, but anyway, they took pictures of us, this whole thing interested me. And then the doctors at the site decided they need to give their patients this credit. So they created their own certificates for their patients, and they came back and said they had a good welcome. You know, they didn't use the PO monitor or whatever. But it seems so hokey here, you know. And our patients, I don't think, would even care about something like that. But allowing that to happen without saying, that wasn't part of the protocol, or, you know, well, how is that going to change the outcomes, or, you know, whatever. And there were just other things I'm sure went on locally. That's implementation science. That to do whatever you need to do to optimize implementation. It's about adaptation. I just published a paper, actually, on the central study we did, where we mapped using a model created by someone named Sherman. She wrote a paper developing actually a framework for measuring adaptation during implementation studies and practice. And we did it quantitatively, actually, to just sort of look at how much changed. And so one thing I want to point out is in implementation science, we talk about, now we sort of start to talk about core components. Because the core component in the Duet study, the down study, was training you had to go through. But sometimes doctors weren't there, so they did it online. Or sometimes sites turned over and we had to do multiple. Or sometimes they had to do one-on-one because they couldn't show up with there was a referral system, but to the foot line, you could do that. Dental sites were very backward back then, they didn't even have any charge some of that. You could do it through the electronic health record, you could do it through a fax to click program, you could do it through online. The problem with doing something like that is we didn't have the sample size to understand how those adaptations affected the outcome. And we noticed that in this particular study, because we frankly didn't do enough pre-implementation and intervention research on formative work to understand what effects it was. We had really underestimated how difficult it would be to implement the intervention. And so we went back to say, like, what did we change here? And there were tremendous amount of intervention adaptations, but we maintained the core components. Everybody had a referral system. Everybody had a system in their chart, in the EHR, or the paper chart that prompted screening and documentation. Everybody had window training, the pursuit training. We backed into, we did stick to that, but I still feel uncomfortable about all the adaptations we made. I mean, we're seeing actually in effect size of like the same across all the but we still don't know whether, and I should say, like, a lot of these kinds of studies, you do an efficacy study and you go out to try to do an effectiveness and you lose effect size, right? It's whether you get away from the efficacy study. And because of these issues, things need to change.
Hopefully you answer the question. That's going to be our last question, and then.
Okay, well, I love the observation that you gave between, in setting like Vietnam, a lot of it is not a separation between the outer and inner settings, so the doctors basically inactive in the there's no division there. I was curious, have you thought about, or is it possible to include the ministers in the evaluation somehow, and how that might be able to tie into the sustainability? Is there any, or another way of saying it, is there any way of tracking or monitoring change in the ministries themselves?
Interesting question. I think actually, that's really great.
Yeah.
Follow that.
A network analysis.
In some ways, it's like a case study of different tobacco globally. I think it's really interesting because you can track over time from the time countries ratified the FCCC and what they did. In fact, that's what Martin's group is trying to do, is that we could look at surveys to understand how they implement it. But you could look at changes in the way in which they help address this issue and see how that affected the way it's implemented. I think that's, a question now post this study, but an important one. Good. Thank you all. Thank you.
One, I really want to thank Donna. It's really glad to see everybody coming, and we really want to thank you for coming to this implementation science webinar series for the next important installment. I want to use this also as an opportunity to make a pitch for the implementation science course, which Karen Yates and Emmanuel Pepper are teaching in January, that is soon will be offering here at the College of Public Health. But thank you again on behalf of the Global Health Program and Gbenga Ogedegbe for giving us an amazing talk. Thank you very much. Any questions? Karen, just a bit. So, Karen, and so now we're bringing it home, and then hopefully she'll bring it back on the other. You're interested in